Hello and welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is great to have you with us today.
It really is.
Whether you are commuting, walking the dog, or maybe just finally tackling that pile of laundry you've been ignoring, we are happy to be in your ears.
We appreciate you letting us join you.
And I also want to give a very special welcome to everyone tuning in via the Funeral Channel Network podcast feed. We're so excited to be collaborating and bringing our style of deep analysis to your listeners as well.
It's a real pleasure to be here. And honestly, considering the topic today, having the Funeral Channel Network audience with us is, well, it's perfect.
It really is.
Because we are diving into a subject that they know intimately, but we're looking at it through a lens that might be, new to a lot of people.
We really are. We cover a lot of topics on this show, tech, history, psychology, but today we are talking about the one thing that literally every single human being on the planet has in common.
The great equalizer.
Exactly. We are talking about the end of life, but we aren't just talking about the emotional weight of it or, the logistics of planning a service. We are talking about the physical weight of it.
The environmental footprint.
The environmental footprint of saying goodbye.
Right. It's this massive blind spot in our modern lives. I mean, think about how we live today. You might spend decades meticulously separating your recycling.
Guilty.
You might drive a hybrid or an EV, you buy organic, you worry about plastic straws in the ocean. We curate our lives, to be good stewards of the planet.
I feel so seen right now. I literally washed out a peanut butter jar for what felt like 10 minutes yesterday before putting it in the recycling bin.
Right. And that's great. I mean, we all do that. But the paradox is that when it comes to the final chapter, our death, we often revert to a default setting that completely contradicts those values.
It's a total disconnect.
We engage in a process that is, well, surprisingly industrial and resource intensive.
It is the ultimate cognitive dissonance, isn't it? You spend 50 years avoiding single-use plastics, and then your final act is to be preserved in chemicals and encased in non-biodegradable steel and concrete forever.
That is the core conflict. This is exactly what we are exploring today. We've been reading through a fascinating stack of research, specifically a comprehensive guide titled Eco-Friendly Grief Rituals, Sustainable Legacies and Natural Farewells.
And the mission for this deep dive is to see if we can resolve that conflict. I mean, can we? Can we find a way to make grief and sustainability coexist?
I think we can. The roadmap is there.
Yeah.
It's not the default path most of us are shown.
And I have to say, going through the source material was jarring. It really was. I went in thinking, okay, we'll talk about biodegradable urns, maybe planting a tree, the basics.
The things you hear about.
Right. But the rabbit hole goes so much deeper. We are going to get into some science that feels like it belongs in a biology lab, not a funeral home.
It does get pretty technical.
We're talking about mushroom-based technology, water cremation, and the actual, legal frameworks of conservation.
It is innovative, absolutely. But before we get lost in the cool factor of the technology, I think the so what here is crucial.
Okay.
This isn't just about being green for the sake of improved metrics or, carbon credits. It's about authenticity. If you're someone who finds peace in the woods or who loves the ocean, there's a profound disconnect in a farewell that actively harms those environments.
Remembrance as responsibility. That phrase from the text really stuck with me.
Me too. It's powerful.
It's the idea that your legacy isn't just what you leave behind in terms of memory, but what you leave intact physically on the planet.
Yes. So let's start at the beginning, or I guess the end.
The end, right. We need to establish the baseline here.
Yeah.
Because I think most people, myself included, before this, assume that a traditional burial is just natural. You put a body in a box, you put the box in the ground, dust to dust. Simple. But the sources are telling us that the dust to dust part is actually what the modern funeral industry is actively fighting against.
That's a very, very accurate way to put it. The phrase dust to dust is poetic, but the modern Western funeral is engineered to prevent, or at least significantly delay, that return to dust.
So it's preservation, not decomposition.
Precisely. To understand the environmental cost, we have to look at the three pillars of the conventional burial: the embalming, the casket, and the vault.
Okay, let's unpack those one by one. Embalming. I know the general concept. It preserves the body for the viewing. But historically, this wasn't always the norm, was it?
No, not at all. In fact, for most of human history, natural burial was the only way. Embalming as a standard practice in America really only dates back to the Civil War.
There's a civil war that recently.
That recently, yeah. It was a
Hold on.
practical necessity. It was a way to get soldiers' bodies home from the battlefield without them decomposing on the, long train ride.
So it was about transport.
It was a sanitary and logistical solution that eventually morphed into a cosmetic standard for public viewings. We took a wartime necessity and turned it into a domestic tradition.
Wow. But what is the actual environmental impact? I mean, is it just that it delays things? Or is there more to it?
Oh, it's the chemistry.
Right.
Embalming fluid isn't just, vinegar and wire. It is a cocktail of chemicals, primarily formaldehyde, which is a known carcinogen,
Right. I've heard that.
along with methanol and other solvents. So when you bury an embalmed body, you aren't just burying organic matter, you are burying gallons of this toxic solution.
Gallons. You said gallons, plural.
Yes, typically 3 to 4 gallons per body. The research we looked at suggests that in the U.S. alone, we bury enough embalming fluid every single year to fill 8 Olympic-sized swimming pools.
Wait, what? 8?
8 Olympic-sized swimming pools.
That is a staggering visual, just
Really?
full of formaldehyde, and that's every year.
Every single year. And that fluid doesn't just stay in the casket forever. Eventually, everything leaks. I mean, caskets are not hermetically sealed forever. It leaches into the soil, and it poses a real risk to groundwater.
So we're effectively pickling our loved ones and then burying them.
It's an antiseptic attempt to stop a biological process that is meant to happen. It's fighting nature.
Wow. Okay, so that's the chemical load, the first pillar. Then we have the container, the casket.
Right.
And in the traditional model, we aren't talking about a simple pine box, are we?
We usually aren't, no. We're talking about finished hardwoods,
Yeah.
often mahogany, cherry, walnut, beautiful woods, or metal.
Steel, copper, bronze.
Exactly. And these are not scrap materials. This requires harvesting old-growth forests. It involves mining, manufacturing, the whole industrial chain.
I tried to look up some numbers on this because the text mentioned it was resource intensive, but I really wanted to quantify that. The amount of steel we bury, it's not insignificant.
It's massive. The estimates vary, of course, but we are looking at roughly 100,000 tons of steel buried in American cemeteries every single year.
100,000 tons.
100,000 tons.
Hey, put that in perspective for me. What does that look like?
To give you a sense of scale, that is enough steel to rebuild the Golden Gate Bridge.
No.
Yes. Every single year. We are taking that metal, mining it, manufacturing it, transporting it, and then putting it in the ground where it will never be used again.
It's just gone.
It is a one-way trip for those resources, a permanent removal from the supply chain.
That is, wow. I mean, we worry about recycling soup cans, and then we bury a Golden Gate Bridge annually. I'm speechless. And then the third component, this is the one that I honestly didn't realize was a requirement until we read this. The vault.
The burial vault, yes. This is often a surprise to people.
What exactly is it? It's like a box for the box.
That's a great way to put it. It's a gravel, or more commonly, a concrete liner that goes into the grave first. Then the casket is lowered into the vault, and a heavy concrete lid is placed on top.
And this is mandatory in most cemeteries. Why?
In most conventional cemeteries, yes, it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to be really clear about why, because it's not what people think. A lot of families think the vault is there to protect the casket or the body from the element.
Right, that's what I would assume.
But it's actually there for the lawnmower.
The lawnmower, you're kidding.
I am not.
Yeah.
Basically, if you bury a box in the dirt, eventually that box collapses. The dirt settles. You get a depression in the ground.
Okay, that makes sense.
Well, that makes it very difficult to drive a heavy riding mower over the grave to keep the grass flat and perfectly manicured. The vault, which is usually reinforced concrete, prevents the ground from ever settling.
So we're burying concrete bunkers.
Billions of pounds of it.
So the landscaping crew has an easier time keeping the lawn flat.
Correct. It's purely for landscape maintenance and aesthetics.
So again, the numbers here must be huge.
They are. We bury millions of tons of reinforced concrete annually. We are essentially building a subterranean infrastructure that serves no purpose other than keeping the grass flat.
It effectively turns a cemetery into a landfill. A very neat and tidy landfill, but a landfill nonetheless.
That is the harsh reality. It is a landfill for metal, for concrete, and for chemically treated wood. It is a highly managed static space, not a natural living habitat.
Okay, so I'm listening to this, and I'm thinking what I assume a lot of our listeners are thinking right now. Well, that's why I'm getting cremated.
Common refrain.
Right. I've always thought of cremation as the eco-friendly option. It just feels cleaner, no land use, no big metal box, no concrete vault. But the expert analysis in our source material suggests we need to put a giant asterisk next to that assumption.
We really do. This is what the source calls the cremation myth. And I want to be careful here. Cremation is generally a better choice than a conventional burial with a vault and embalming, strictly in terms of land use and materials.
Okay, so it's better but not perfect.
Right. But it is not a zero-impact choice.
Yeah.
Not by a long shot.
Because you're burning fossil fuels. That's the main issue.
That's the main issue, yes. Traditional flame-based cremation requires a significant amount of energy. You have to heat a chamber, a retort, to somewhere between 1,400 and 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit.
That's incredibly hot.
Hotter than a volcano. And you have to keep it at that temperature for 2 to 3 hours per cremation. That is almost always done with natural gas.
So it's a carbon emissions issue.
It is a major carbon emissions issue. The source materials cited that a single cremation produces about the same amount of CO2 as driving an average car for about 500 miles.
500 miles. So like driving from LA to San Francisco.
Pretty much, yeah. And that might not sound like a lot in isolation, for one person.
Yeah.
But you have to multiply it by the millions of cremations happening annually. It adds up to a very significant carbon footprint.
Are there other emissions besides CO2? I feel like I remember reading something in the sources about mercury. Is that a real concern?
Yes, that is a very specific and real concern. If the deceased had dental fillings, the old silver amalgams, those contain mercury.
Ah, right.
When you incinerate the body at that temperature, that mercury vaporizes and is released into the atmosphere. Many modern crematoriums now have filtration systems to capture this, which is great, but not all of them do, especially older ones.
So you are potentially releasing heavy metals directly into the air?
Potentially, yes. It's a known issue that the industry is working to address, but it's still a factor.
So if traditional burial is a resource hog a landfill of steel and concrete, and traditional cremation is a carbon emitter, what is the actual alternative? The source material defines this concept of eco-friendly grief rituals. What is the core definition we're working with here? What's the guiding principle?
The core goal is pretty simple. It's minimizing impact while preserving dignity and meaning. It's about stripping away the industrial layers we've added to death over the last 150 years and getting back to the biological reality.
The dust-to-dust idea, but for real this time.
For real this time. The source calls it remembrance as responsibility. It's the idea that we can comfort the living without burdening the earth.
That brings us perfectly to section 2 of our deep dive, green burials. The text refers to this as returning to the earth. I want to get specific here. What does a green burial actually look like? How is it different from just, being buried in the woods behind your house?
Well, the legality is the main difference from the backyard approach.
Yeah.
You generally have to do this in a certified designated space.
Uh-huh.
But in a green burial, the rules are defined by the no list.
The no list. I like that. So what's on it?
No embalming chemicals,
Okay.
period.
Okay, that's number 1.
No concrete vaults or grave liners.
Got it.
And no non-biodegradable materials. So no metal caskets, no varnished hardwoods, no synthetic fabrics like polyester linings or clothing.
So everything that goes into the ground must be able to break down naturally.
Exactly. The goal is to facilitate, not hinder, natural decomposition so that the body can actually nourish the soil. It's about re-entering the cycle of life rather than being isolated from it in a sealed box.
Let's talk about the hardware then, the containers. If we can't use a mahogany casket with brass handles, what are we using? The source material had some really cool examples of material innovation here.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how creativity blossoms when you apply these kinds of constraints. On the one hand, you have the very simple, beautiful options, wicker caskets woven from willow.
Like a big basket.
Exactly like a beautiful handcrafted basket.
Yeah.
Or bamboo, which is a rapidly renewable grass. Untreated pine is also very common, a simple plain pine box.
And cardboard, I saw that mentioned.
Yes, cardboard is a very common, dignified, and often very low-cost option. They can be surprisingly strong and can be personalized, painted, or written on by the family.
That's a nice touch.
It is. But then you get into the really high-tech, biotech side of things.
Okay, let's go there. The mushroom factor. I have to admit, I read that section twice. It sounds like something out of a sci-fi novel. Are we literally talking about being buried in a suit made of mushrooms?
Essentially, yes. It's often called an infinity burial suit. And it's one of the most exciting developments in the field. It relies on a process called mycoremediation.
Mycoremediation. Okay, break that down for us. Myco is mushroom. Right.
Myco for fungus, remediation for cleaning up. But to understand why this matters, We have to look at what is actually in a modern human body.
Right. It's not just us.
Exactly. Even if we aren't embalmed, we are walking filters. Over a lifetime, we accumulate a whole host of things. Heavy metals, lead from old paint, mercury from fish, cadmium, plus microplastics, preservatives from food, pesticides, pharmaceutical residues.
We are full of the stuff we interact with in the modern world.
We are. So if you just go into the ground, even in a green burial, those toxins eventually leach out as you decompose. This is where the mushrooms come in. Mushrooms are nature's great decomposers, but they are also incredible chemists.
How does the suit work?
The suit is a cotton garment that's been seeded with specific mushroom spores, the mycelium network.
And the mycelium eats the toxin.
It chelates them, which is even cooler. The mycelium releases enzymes that break down organic toxins, like the preservatives and pesticides, into harmless base components. And it can actually bind with heavy metals, pulling them out of the soil and locking them into the fungal tissue, rendering them inert and non-toxic to nearby plants.
So instead of your body polluting the soil, the mushrooms use your body's decomposition process as fuel to actively clean the soil.
That's it. You become a remediation site. It frames death as a final restorative act.
That is simultaneously kind of gross and incredibly poetic. I love it.
It is. But I know for some people, the idea of a mushroom suit is a bridge too far. It feels a bit too experimental or maybe just a bit strange.
Or just visually confronting, maybe.
Right. And for those people, there is the shroud,
Mm-hmm.
which is arguably the most traditional ancient option of all.
The shroud seems like the ultimate retro move. It feels very biblical.
It is timeless. It's simply a wrapping of the body in natural cloth, cotton, linen, silk, wool. It's how most of humanity buried their dead for thousands of years before the invention of the modern funeral industry.
It's very simple.
It's intimate, it's simple, and it uses the absolute minimum of resources.
There was an interesting discussion point in the text about the balance between familiarity and simplicity. Like, for some families, seeing a shrouded body might be too confronting because we are so culturally used to the box.
That's a very real psychological hurdle. The shape of a body in a shroud is, it's undeniably a body.
A casket offers a geometric abstraction, a neat shape.
It provides a barrier, a clean shape that can be easier for some people to process in the moment of grief. The good news is you don't have to choose one or the other to be green. You can have a green burial in a woven willow casket that looks beautiful and structured, but it still meets all the sustainability criteria. The choice is there.
So we have the body prepped, no chemicals, biodegradable container. Now, where do we put it? You can't just drive into a regular cemetery and say, hey, skip the vault, please, right? They'd look at you like you have 3 heads.
Usually not, no. Most conventional cemeteries have strict bylaws requiring vaults because of that lawnmower issue we discussed. So the source outlines 3 main types of grounds where green burial can happen.
Okay, what are they?
First, you have hybrid cemeteries.
These are regular cemeteries that have just carved out a section for this.
Exactly. They might have a meadow or a natural burial section where they don't require vaults, and maybe they don't use pesticides or herbicides on the grass in that specific area.
That seems like a great entry point.
It's a great bridge option because it's often local and accessible. You don't have to drive 4 hours out into the countryside. You can be buried in the same cemetery as your grandparents, just in a different way.
Okay, so that's option 1. What's 2?
Then you have the dedicated natural burial grounds. These are spaces entirely dedicated to green burial, no traditional plots at all. They are managed to look like meadows or forests, not manicured lawns.
So no headstones.
Generally no upright polished headstones. They focus on preserving a natural landscape.
And then the third one, which I found the most inspiring, the conservation cemetery.
This is the gold standard mentioned in the text, and for good reason. A conservation cemetery is essentially a nature preserve that is funded by burials.
Oh, it's a land trust.
It is. When you buy a burial plot there, a significant portion of the money goes toward a conservation easement. That's a legal tool that permanently protects that land from any future development. Forever.
So the burial ground is a nature preserve. The act of burial is the mechanism for saving the land.
Yes. Your death actively funds the permanent protection of a wild space.
I love that concept, but we need to do an expectation check here for you, the listener. If you go to visit a grave in a conservation cemetery, it doesn't look like Arlington National Cemetery, does it?
Not at all. And that can be jarring if you aren't prepared. You will not see neat rows of white stones. You won't see flat green mowed grass.
So how do you find a grave?
You might use GPS coordinates on your phone. Seriously. The cemetery will provide them.
GPS.
Really?
Yes, because there might not be a visible marker. Or if there is, it might be a rough, unpolished field stone lying flat on the ground, or a native shrub that's been planted over the site. It's meant to blend in.
So the landscape is the memorial.
The landscape is the memorial. The ground will be uneven. It will be covered in wildflowers, tall grasses, maybe fallen leaves and twigs on a forest floor. It's teeming with life bugs, birds, animals. It's not neat in the way we are used to, but it is vibrantly alive.
That shift from neat and permanent to wild and cyclical is a huge mental leap, I think. It challenges our deep-seated need for control and permanence in the face of death.
It really does. It asks us to find comfort in being part of a cycle, rather than in creating a static monument. Okay, let's pivot back to those who prefer cremation. We established that traditional fire cremation has a significant carbon cost. But the source material highlights some really fascinating, innovative alternatives to fire.
Yes. And this is where the technology gets really interesting. If your goal is to reduce the body to its base mineral components, the ash or cremains, without the use of fossil fuels, the leading technology is alkaline hydrolysis.
Right. I've heard this called water cremation or aquamation.
Those are the more common sort of marketing terms, yes. But scientifically, it's hydrolysis.
How does it actually work? Because when I hear water cremation, I imagine boiling, which sounds pretty terrible.
No, it's not boiling. It's a chemical process that's actually quite gentle. The body is placed in a pressurized steel vessel with a solution of water and a strong base, usually potassium hydroxide, which is a key ingredient in soap making. The vessel is then heated, but only to about 300 degrees Fahrenheit, not the 1800 degrees of flame cremation. The combination of the alkaline solution, the heat, and the pressure accelerates natural decomposition.
So what does the potassium hydroxide do?
It acts as a catalyst. It gently breaks the peptide bonds that hold proteins and tissues together. It's not an acid bath that dissolves things. It's actually the opposite. It's highly alkaline. But it mimics the exact biological process of decomposition that happens in soil over decades.
So it does in, say, 3 or 4 hours what the Earth does in 20 years.
That is a perfect way to describe it.
And what's the output? What's left?
The output is twofold. First, you have a sterile liquid solution of amino acids, peptides, and sugars, which is treated and returned to the municipal water treatment system. It's completely benign. And second, you have the bone fragments.
Just like in a flame cremation.
Exactly. The bones are left behind, softened and porous, and they are then processed into a fine white powder that looks identical to traditional ashes.
So the family still gets an urn full of cremains to keep or scatter.
Yes. To the family, the end result is the same. But the energy use is significantly lower. Some estimates in the source material say up to 90% less carbon footprint than flame cremation.
90%, that's a massive difference.
It is. And crucially, there are zero airborne emissions. So no mercury is released into the atmosphere.
That's a huge win. But as the source notes, there is an advisory here, right? It's not available everywhere.
Correct. It's not legal for human disposition in every state or country yet. The legislation is still catching up to the technology. The yuck factor, as some people call it, has slowed down adoption in some places, even though it's arguably a much cleaner and gentler process than burning, so you definitely need to check your local regulations.
Okay, so let's say you have the ashes, whether from a low-impact fire or from water. What do you do with them? The old school move is the heavy brass urn on the mantelpiece. But if we are going green, that feels a bit, I don't know, industrial.
It does. It's another permanent object made from mined materials. And again, material innovation is key here. We are seeing a huge move toward biodegradable urns.
For scattering in water, for instance.
Yes. If you want to scatter ashes in water, please don't just dump them from a plastic bag or a cardboard box.
I feel like everyone has a story about the wind blowing the ash back onto the mourners at a scattering.
It's a classic, tragic comic moment, and you can avoid it. There are urns made of salt, of sand, or of recycled paper that are designed to float for a few minutes and then dissolve gracefully underwater. It releases the ashes slowly and gently. It makes the whole thing a much more dignified, beautiful ritual.
And for burying ashes in the earth?
Same idea.
Yeah.
There are organic composite urns made from clay or plant fibers that are designed to break down completely in the soil. But my favorite concept in this section, and I think yours too, was the living memorial.
Oh, yeah.
Specifically the tree urn.
Yes. This appeals to the gardener in me so much. Explain how this works.
It's a bio-urn system. It's usually a two-part container. The bottom part holds the ashes, and the top part holds a special soil mixture and a tree sapling of your choice.
Now, you can't just put ashes directly on a plant, can you? I heard they're not good for the soil.
You are exactly right, and that's the key innovation here. Human ash is very high in sodium and has a very high pH, which can actually be toxic to plants if you just dump it directly on their roots.
It'll kill the tree.
It can, yeah. So these systems use a special soil mix that's designed to buffer that pH and neutralize the high salt content. It allows the beneficial nutrients in the ash, like phosphorus and calcium, to be released slowly and safely.
So you plant the whole thing, and the nutrients from the remains actually nourish the tree as it grows.
Correct. The person literally becomes the tree.
Talk about symbolism. I mean, that's incredible. You aren't just looking at a cold stone. You are watching a living thing grow and change through the seasons.
It completely transforms the nature of grief and memorialization. It's not just about looking back at what was lost. It's about looking forward at what is growing. It becomes a living legacy.
It's active.
It's active. The grief transitions into stewardship of that life. I need to go water, Mom. Takes on a whole new, beautiful meaning.
That is a perfect segue into section 4, the ceremony and the stuff. We've talked about the body, which is the main event, but a funeral is also an event. And like any event, a wedding, a big party, it generates waste.
A lot of waste.
I've been to funerals where there are hundreds of glossy, heavy, printed programs that just end up in the trash bin by the door on the way out.
It's a huge source of waste, and it's often overlooked. The eco-friendly grief rituals text really emphasizes that we need to look at the logistics of the memorial service itself.
So where do we start?
It starts with the location. An outdoor ceremony in a park or a natural burial ground reduces the need for heating, cooling, and lighting that a large building requires. But the stuff, as you called it, is where we can make really easy, impactful changes.
Let's talk about the flowers. The standard is those massive, stiff floral arrangements on wire stands.
With the green floral foam blocks holding them together.
Right, the green foam. What's the deal with that?
That floral foam is essentially a block of microplastic pollution. It is a phenol formaldehyde foam that crumbles into dust, but it never, ever biodegrades. It just breaks into smaller and smaller toxic particles.
So it's terrible for the environment.
It's terrible. And the flowers themselves are often flown in from South America or Europe with a huge transportation carbon footprint for something that'll be beautiful for 3 days and then go in a landfill.
So what's the alternative? Potted plants.
Potted plants are a fantastic alternative. They can be taken home by family members and replanted in a garden as a living memorial. Or, if you want cut flowers, the key is slow flowers.
Slow flowers, like slow food.
Exactly the same concept. Locally sourced, seasonal flowers. Arranged without foam, maybe using old-fashioned methods like a flower frog or just tied bouquets. It supports local farmers and eliminates the transport emissions.
Okay, and the stationery. The programs and prayer cards.
Yes. This is where you have to balance the need for information and sentiment with the waste. You don't need a heavy cardstock, glossy, gold foil, multi-page booklet for every single guest.
But people do want something to hold on to. They want a guide for the service, a keepsake.
Of course. And this is where resources like the funeral program site, which was referenced in our reading, are actually really helpful. They provide guidance and templates. You can still create something beautiful and personal, but you can choose to print it on 100% recycled paper with soy-based inks.
Or go digital. That seems like the biggest win for me.
It's a game changer. A digital memorial program can be hosted on a website. It can have videos, unlimited photos, a guest book for people to leave stories. It's dynamic, it lasts forever, and it uses zero paper.
And it also allows people who couldn't travel to the funeral to participate in a meaningful way.
Which is a huge benefit for accessibility and for reducing the carbon footprint of travel.
But for those who still want a physical keepsake, a little something to take home. The text mentioned the keepsake revolution. I love that term.
Me too, because it's about moving past the cheap plastic trinket or a laminated bookmark that just ends up in a junk drawer.
So what's the alternative?
Seed paper cards.
Explain what that is.
It's paper pulp, usually recycled, that has been embedded with wildflower seeds. So you print the memorial information on it, maybe a photo and a poem. The guest takes this card home, they put it in a pot of soil or their garden, they water it, and the paper dissolves and the seeds grow into flowers.
That is so cool. It literally turns the trash from the event into a living garden.
It does. It gives people an action to take, a way to participate in that idea of renewal. It stops the cycle of memorial clutter. We often feel obligated to keep these little trinkets, but they just sit there. A plantable memorial is something you engage with.
Let's move to section 5. Rituals in nature. We've talked about the logistics, the materials, but I want to talk about the feeling, the psychological benefits. Why does a nature-based ritual feel so different than one in a funeral home chapel?
I think it comes down to a concept called grounding. Grief is chaotic. It's disorienting. It can feel very unmoored, like you're floating. It isolates you inside your own head.
That's a great description.
Nature is the opposite of that. It is cyclical, it's steady, and well, it's indifferent in a very comforting way. When you stand by the ocean or in a forest, you are reminded that the world is vast and ancient and continues its cycles regardless of our personal tragedies.
It puts the loss in perspective without diminishing it.
It does. And the source mentions specific rituals like memorial walks or stone placing ceremonies. The key here is that these are active rituals.
What do you mean by active?
In a traditional funeral, you often just sit in a pew and listen. You are a passive recipient of the service. In a nature ritual, you are walking. You are carrying a stone to add to a memorial cairn. You are scattering petals on a stream. That physical movement helps process the emotion that's stuck inside you.
It gets it out of your body.
It gets it out of your body. And the connection to the seasons, which the text highlights, is also profound.
I thought so too.
It aligns our internal state with the external world. A spring planting ceremony for renewal and new life. An autumn ritual of writing memories on fallen leaves and letting them blow away for letting go. It validates the changes we are feeling inside by showing us those same patterns in nature.
It emphasizes that death is a season in the cycle of life, not just a final, abrupt endpoint.
Exactly. It's about connection, not consumption. Cycles, not permanence.
Now, we have to get into the tricky stuff, the really human side of this. Section 6. The human element, because all of this sounds wonderful on paper, save the earth, plant a tree, have a beautiful walk in the woods. But when you are actually in the throes of grief, it's complicated.
Deeply complicated.
And the source material issues a very important warning about the guilt trap.
This is critical. We cannot, and I want to be very clear about this, we absolutely cannot let sustainability become another stick to beat ourselves up with during grief.
Right. The last thing you need is to be standing there mourning your mother and simultaneously thinking, oh no, her casket is hurting the ozone layer.
Exactly. Or feeling judged by others, or by yourself because you chose cremation instead of a conservation burial, because it was what you could afford or what was available. Sustainability should enhance comfort and align with your values. It should not add stress.
So what's the solution?
The source emphasizes open conversations. It's about making choices that are values-driven, not obligation-driven. If the eco-choice feels right and brings you comfort, do it. If it feels like a burden, or if it's too expensive, or if it's causing family conflict, then prioritize your mental and emotional health.
And it doesn't have to be all or nothing, right? The text talks about a hybrid approach.
Absolutely. This is not a purity test. You can have a traditional church service, which might be very important for your family's religious needs, and then follow it with a simple green burial. Or you can have a conventional cremation, but then choose a biodegradable urn and plant a tree.
Mix and match.
Mix and match what works for you and your family. There is no single correct way to grieve or to be sustainable.
I want to ask about kids, because this can be so hard for them to understand. The source material had a specific and really interesting insight about children and these eco-friendly rituals.
Yes, this was so heartening to read. The takeaway is that children often respond very, very positively to sustainability. The concept of grandma is helping the tree grow is much less scary and much less abstract to a child than grandma is in heaven or grandma is just sleeping.
It's tangible. They can see the tree.
It's tangible, and it gives them something to do, too.
Right. It gives them agency.
It does. They can help plant the flowers. They can be in charge of watering the memorial tree. They can paint a stone for the grave. It teaches stewardship alongside remembrance. It gives them a positive, active role in a situation where they often feel completely powerless.
And we should touch on the cultural context here. I think sometimes people hear green burial and think it's some new age, hipster fad from California.
For crunchy granola thing to do.
Exactly. But the expert notes in our source materials say that's a complete misconception.
It's a huge misconception. In reality, green burial is the original traditional way. It's how Jewish customs have operated for millennia. A plain pine box, no embalming, direct contact with the earth. It's how Muslim traditions work, with a simple shroud. Many indigenous cultures around the world have always practiced earth-friendly burials that honor the cycle of life.
So the traditional American funeral with the chemicals and the steel and the concrete is actually the historical outlier.
It is the modern invention. It's barely 150 years old.
Uh-huh.
In many ways, going green is actually a return to our deepest roots. It connects us to our ancestors just as much as it connects us to the future of the planet.
Okay, so we've covered the why, the what, and the how. Now let's talk about action. Section 7. If someone is listening to this right now and thinking, yes, this is what I want, what do they do? Because if you don't plan for this, your family is probably going to be sold the default package.
That is the unfortunate reality. The default in the funeral industry is still the conventional model because it's what they know and what is, frankly, most profitable. So pre-planning is absolutely essential.
You have to write it down.
You have to document these preferences. And this isn't just for you, right? You should see it as a final gift to your family.
It's a massive relief for them, I would imagine.
It is. Imagine your family in the depths of shock and grief, trying to guess if you would have wanted a mushroom suit or a mahogany casket. It's an impossible position. Write it down. Be specific. I want a green burial. I do not want embalming. I want a biodegradable shroud made of linen. The more detail, the better.
And then you have to talk to the providers. The outline mentions empowering the listener to ask hard questions.
Yes. When you walk into a funeral home, you are a consumer. You have the right to ask for what you want. It's okay to have a checklist.
So what's on the checklist?
What green options do you offer? Are you partnered with a conservation or natural burial ground nearby? Do you allow families to use biodegradable caskets or shrouds from outside suppliers?
And if they say no, or they try to talk you out of it?
Then you can walk away and look elsewhere. Or you can ask them to help you find a provider who can meet your needs. Resources like the Green Burial Council and other educational sites have directories and materials to help families advocate for themselves. The market is changing because families are demanding it.
It really is a shift in power, taking control of that final narrative.
It is. It's your farewell. It should reflect your values.
So we've been on quite a journey today. I mean, from the chemical realities of embalming fluid and concrete vaults to the serene image of a conservation forest funded by burials. Let's try to synthesize this. What is the big takeaway for you?
I think the journey we've described, from this resource-heavy industrial model to the nature-centric regenerative model, it really mirrors a much bigger shift in our collective consciousness. We are slowly but surely realizing that we are part of nature, not separate from it or masters of it.
That phrase again, remembrance as responsibility.
Exactly. The shift to eco-friendly rituals affirms a powerful truth. Even in saying goodbye, especially saying goodbye, we can care for the world that continues on after us. It reframes death not just as a loss, but as a final, meaningful contribution.
I love that. The idea that grief and hope can coexist. That just as nature renews itself every spring, memory can grow into something living and beautiful.
Like a very hopeful way to look at our own mortality, isn't it?
It really is. And I want to leave our listeners with that final provocative thought we touched on earlier. It's something that has been spinning in my head since I read this section on conservation cemeteries.
It's a powerful one.
Just take a moment and really imagine this. Imagine if your final act on Earth wasn't just leaving it, but was legally and permanently protecting a piece of it forever. Imagine if your legacy was literally a protected forest, a wild meadow that exists because you died and were buried there. How does that change the way you view your own life and your own death?
It changes everything. It turns the end of one life into the beginning of a protected life for an entire ecosystem.
That is a lot to think about. We hope this deep dive has given you some tools, maybe some comfort, and perhaps a new perspective on what it means to say farewell.
It's been a real privilege to explore this with you.
Thank you all for listening. To our regulars and to our new friends from the Funeral Channel Network, thanks for being here with us. Take care of yourselves and take care of the planet. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.
Goodbye, everyone.